G'day and welcome to a US of Ed special on the Race for the White House 2020. Ed Blakely is a former Washington insider, an internationally recognised leader in urban development and planning, advisor, author, and one of the two hosts on this podcast. My name is Sean Britton from the radio station 2SER. We're joined this week by Dana Rawls and Stephanie Zuniga-Maher. Dana Rawls is a researcher, writer and editor with 20 years of media and communications experience. A global citizen, she's worked in several countries and has a passionate interest in technology, media and human rights, and how they work together to contribute to humanity's social and economic development. Stephanie Zuniga-Maher is a native of Washington, D.C. with a lifelong interest in politics. She was nearly born in the White House during the Carter administration and volunteered on the Clinton campaign in high school. She holds a BA in political science from Duke University and a master's degree from the University of Sydney. She currently resides in Sydney, Australia and works in the talent, people and culture industry. She remains politically active as the Democrats Abroad Australia Global Black Caucus Chair. Ed, for those who have already gotten it out of the way, early voting, we're seeing record numbers of people turning out early for this election. Why is that?
Well, I think Mr. Trump did that for us. He said, you better do it twice. So people are going to the polls and bringing their mail with them. I think he scared people into voting, believe it or not. Even with COVID, people are going to vote. They're keeping their social distance and all that because unfortunately, they're not voting rapidly for Joe Biden. They're voting against Donald Trump for COVID and for denying them the vote. People are ticked. I would say another word, but we're on radio and television. That's why. I think we're up to 7 million now already.
17 million.
17 million, I'm sorry.
17 million have already voted. And Sean, in addition to what Ed said, Trump did scare a lot of people. And I know in my home state of Georgia, the voter suppression efforts have been astronomical. And other states like Texas and North Carolina and so many states, people are terrified that their votes aren't going to be counted, that their ability to even get to the polls will be, and they'll face these quote unquote poll watchers that Trump has, amassed this army of 50,000 people that will come to the polls. And a lot of people are saying, look, this is my right. This is my privilege. This is my duty as an American. And I'm not going to, throw that aside. And this is the most important election of my lifetime. And a lot of people are going out and they're voting in record numbers, including in my home state of Georgia. And I am so happy and so excited to see it. It is absolutely fantastic.
I think it's really heartening to see the motivation and the determination that people have, because the lines are long. And it's not like they're just driving up, dropping off their ballot and leaving. Some of them are waiting for 6, 7, 8 hours.
Exactly.
Especially during a pandemic. And it just shows that when people are determined, and like Ed said, determined to vote him out, that they will go to whatever lengths they need to. And especially when people see that their rights are being taken away, is that they're even more determined. They're doubling down on that effort. And so I think that's really, really encouraging to see.
Guys, if we win, we're going to have to come up with some policies.
Exactly. Joe's got that covered, though. I'm honestly not worried about that at all.
I got to say, I really do find it commendable, those individuals, some of them up to 11 hours in Georgia waiting to cast their ballots. I mean, as an Australian, I'm outraged if I turn up to my polling place and they don't have a sausage sizzle. I can't imagine waiting 11 hours to cast my vote in any country that can be considered a democracy.
Well, considering the fact you don't have a job, 11 hours is nothing. You'd have been on the job. but they take the jobs away from us, so we might as well go to the polls.
Yeah.
I was going to say that would be a great entrepreneurial effort for someone, bringing democracy sausage to the people waiting in line.
I think that's being done in Georgia.
Exactly. Yeah. So a fish fry, I mean, something, there's definitely opportunity there. But I tell you, this year has been absolutely insane in terms of the votes, starting with the primaries. I mean, I found out personally from an investigator that my primary ballot never made it this year, despite me having mailed it several weeks in advance. So trying to be proactive, I put my general election ballot in a registered post envelope, only to have been told last week that it's been sitting in a mail warehouse in Melbourne since then. And I put it in the mail on the 18th of September.
Wow.
So I know. Oh, you can imagine the rage. And I was absolutely gutted when they told me that. So for the first time in my entire life, I've actually had to do the FWAB, the federal write-in absentee ballot, because I am that determined that my vote will be counted. And I know there's tens of millions of people that are standing in those lines for 10, 11 hours that are willing to do whatever it takes. They're not going to take my vote from me. That includes Australia Post. That includes the state of Georgia. I will be voting one way or the other. So
Good.
That motivation is definitely felt, I think, worldwide.
Dana, I just wanted to reiterate one of the things you mentioned before in one of your answers there. Trump's call out to his supporters to watch polling places to make sure nothing, in his eyes, nothing dodgy is going on. It sounds to me like this is a recipe for a tragedy.
No, it sounds exactly that way to me as well, Sean. There are certain tests, there are certain criteria that make people qualified to be poll watchers in every state. And I'm just guessing here, looking at the quality of the people that he has working in the highest levels of the administration. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say I'm pretty sure that most of the people that are going to be these poll watchers don't have a lot of those qualifications. I mean, it is astonishing that a presidential campaign feels that it has any legal standing whatsoever, particularly a presidential campaign, that it represents the party that has been found throughout decades to have been absolutely creative when it comes to the levels of voter suppression. And the fact that this campaign feels in any way qualified to send out poll watchers, in my opinion, for the sole purpose of intimidating people. And I'm sure that it will be just a coincidence that they'll be focused primarily in poor neighborhoods, minority areas. I think your assessment that this is a tragedy in the making is 100% correct. And I think that is exactly what the plan is.
Yeah, I want poll watchers from the United Nations.
Exactly. Or from the
This
Carter
is a crippled
Center.
state.
Yeah, the Carter Center or some of these other organizations where they train people for years to do this and to know what they're looking for. I don't want some guy that's a Trump supporter who just has nothing else to do to go and be intimidating and standing around watching people voting. I mean, this if it's not illegal, it should be.
It is.
COVID-19, unforgettably, we saw Trump himself, along with a number of associates and top Republicans, contract the disease a couple of weeks ago. This sent both sides into a spin, kind of scrambling with how to best work this into a election narrative. 2 weeks out, what kind of impact is it having now?
I think it's quite interesting that, from Trump's point of view, obviously he had something, but he's made this miraculous recovery and he's portraying himself as, oh, I'm strong enough, I'm this perfect physical specimen, which we all know is probably highly unlikely. So he's able to downplay the risks associated with COVID-19, and he's able to downplay the disease, which is what he's been doing over the past 12 months, really. And so you contrast that with Kamala Harris, who at the first hint that her campaign had been touched by, I think, the pilots of her of her charter plane, you know, she said, right, I'm not campaigning anymore. I'm just going to take a little pause to let everyone get tested and isolate, and to really do what I would see, and what from Australian point of view would be the right thing in terms of isolating
That's right. That
yeah,
is such a good point. That is such a great point, Stephanie.
But you also have people like Chris Christie, who, you know, clearly was so close to Trump that he didn't want to be seen as going against him, but who wound up in the ICU and then said, you know, I wore a mask, I did the right things for months, I didn't do it for 4 days, and almost died. So I think you really see this kind of very sharp contrast between trying to, I guess, play the party line throughout the
But
campaign.
COVID is the number one issue. Because the
Absolutely.
numbers are going up in spite
Yes.
of what he says.
Absolutely.
On COVID and financial stimulus, Trump initially said Americans would not see any more relief until he was returned at the election. Now, this has gone back and forth, but how are we seeing the stimulus debate now play out for voters?
Well, Nancy's given a Tuesday deadline.
Mm.
Now, one of the problems has been that Nancy Pelosi and everyone else knows the top numbers, but they don't know the details. Apparently, the program, from what I've heard from some of the insiders, that Trump has offered is a program where all the money goes to business and to farmers, and $1,000 handouts and some uptick on paychecks. So the biggest beneficiaries from this, like the first one, is going back to the same people, the airlines, etc. I have no problem with that as long as the people get their share. But this is a vote grabbing issue with him. He even wanted the letters all to be signed by him, going to individuals and to the farmers. This is a big deal for farmers because they're way down this year. If he can get those farmers a few $1 million, he might keep Iowa.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, Ed, because I noticed I've been reading that Mitch McConnell, and there's quite a bit of daylight even between Mitch McConnell and the White House on the latest efforts. I mean, so the White House with Steve Mnuchin are basically trying to get, and Pelosi obviously are trying to get closer to 2 trillion. McConnell's trying to keep it around, I believe, 500 billion. I mean,
that's just walking around money, 500 million.
Exactly.
That's enough for us for the show.
So it just kind of makes you wonder. So, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think that this daylight between even the White House and Senate Republicans, this is something that's going to happen even after the election happens?
I think one thing that's really important to realize is that, you know, they're playing politics and with people's lives. People are on the verge of serious personal, economic, and financial collapse. Their rent, you know, a lot of them can't pay their rent. You know,
including Trump supporters.
Can't pay their rent. Yes,
exactly.
You know, they don't have access to healthcare because their employments, you know, they're not working, so they don't have the health coverage. So people in America, there are lots of people who are on the cliff that they are about to fall off. So whether it's, you know, Pelosi's plan or Trump's plan or whoever's plan, the U.S. is facing a serious economic issue just around the corner.
Yeah,
when people
and to some
start
extent,
getting interested in things.
Some of the Democrats have been speaking out against Pelosi, saying give some money, any money to anybody. And I'm there too.
Yeah.
Let's just move on.
Yeah.
It's not going to change anybody's vote at this point.
No. But it could save a lot of people from homelessness, coming
Absolutely.
and all of these other problems. I mean, when you think about children who aren't necessarily going to school, for some underprivileged children, that's where they eat. If they're meant to be homeschooling and there's no food in the house, then what?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very sad situation.